Some First Nations think a land claim is about establishing our claim to the land. In fact, it's about Canada establishing its claim to our land. That is why Canada's land claim policy, a government process to settle unceded Indigenous lands, requires negotiating with First Nations to extinguish their rights, their underlying title to the land. The government calls this reconciliation. Just recently, in late September 2014, Canada quietly introduced the first major reform to the land claims policy in 30 years. The laughably short consultation period ends on November 30th. This consultation is being led by Douglas Eford, who was the author of Building Partnerships, a report commissioned in 2013 by Canada to make recommendations on West Coast energy infrastructure. Building Partnerships spelled out Canada's priorities, mainly the need to capitalize on global energy demands. The impediment to an expanded, diversified energy market is that Aboriginal peoples hold constitutionally protected title, rights, and treaties with which industry and government must legally comply. When Europeans first came to these lands, they formed political alliances with Indigenous nations. These agreements were enshrined in treaties. The last treaties signed were the numbered treaties between 1871 and 1930, which swept the country to secure land for railways, resource development, and settlement. Then, for more than 40 years, no treaties were signed, though many lands remained unsettled. A Supreme Court of Canada decision in 1973 changed all that. The Calder case opened up the possibility of Aboriginal title in BC and on unceded lands more generally. Shortly following, Canada rolled out the land claims policy. The policy marked a turn away from the harsh denial of Indigenous rights towards a softer, subtler form of denial. Negotiating groups must cede approximately 95% of their lands. Bands must agree to release all past claims, transition their unceded lands into fee simple or private property, begin to pay taxes, and gradually become ethnic municipalities under provincial jurisdiction. That is why Russell Diabo calls these the termination tables, meaning they terminate or eliminate Indigenous peoples' inherent rights. The new land claims policy reforms were triggered, ironically, by the Supreme Court of Canada's Tsilhqot'in Nation versus British Columbia decision in the summer of 2014. The decision recognized for the first time an Indigenous nation's underlying Aboriginal title to the land, rather than simply laying out tests for how this could be done. To push forward the land claims policy at a moment when the Supreme Court of Canada affirmed the inherent territorial interest of Indigenous peoples is a stark message for the federal government to send. The new interim policy reiterates that there are no guarantees of resource revenue sharing, no guarantees of subsurface rights, and no decision-making power over environmental management, let alone free, prior, and informed consent, which is recommended by the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It is up to political movements to transform the federal comprehensive claims and self-government policies from denial and extinguishment to recognition and affirmation of Indigenous rights of self-determination. In this spirit, defenders of the land and Idle No More are putting forward 4 demands: disengagement of negotiating bans from the termination tables and forgiveness for all loans taken out to finance the process, fundamental joint reform of both the comprehensive land claims and self-government policies with the aim of making the policies consistent with both Canadian law on Aboriginal title, Aboriginal rights and treaty rights, and with inherent Indigenous laws of jurisdiction. Third, the provision of funding grants to Indigenous peoples for negotiation processes. And lastly, an absolute rejection of the unilaterally imposed Eford consultation process. Join us. We gain strength in unity. What's your nation's vision?